In this week's edition of Climate Friday newsletter, we're going to talk about temperature swings. It seems like this time of year, it is from one extreme to the other. Last week, we saw a historic blizzard across much of the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, and the East Coast that brought record low temperatures, sub-zero wind chills, and a bitterly cold chill in the air. Now, this week, we are forecasting a spring-like warm-up as temperatures surge into the 50s. So in this week's Climate Friday, we're going to break down these temperature swings and let you know what is caused by weather, what is caused by climate, and how temperature extremes may be changing in the future. Let's talk about those graphics as we delve into the impacts of climate change on temperature extremes and on these rapid ups and downs that we have felt as of late. Now, Christmas weekend was one of the coldest on record across Northwest Ohio and southeastern Michigan. In fact, on Friday, following that Arctic polar plunge, we dropped down to 3 degrees below zero. You may have remembered on WTOL 11, we used the term flash freeze. And boy, those temperatures fell in a hurry. The wind chills also fell. We dropped down as low as 30 degrees below zero. Remarkably cold wind chills due to the gusty winds behind that Arctic cold front. Now, this week, the spring warmth arrives, and into next week, we could top out at 61 degrees on Tuesday with some unseasonably mild temps to start off January. What an incredible temperature swing to go from below zero and wind chills 30 below all the way up to 61 degrees above zero. This is a 90-degree temperature swing when you factor in comparing that wind chill to Tuesday's forecast. Over 90 degrees of difference in how you perceive it outside. What a remarkable temperature swing. Now, of course, these are oftentimes due by shifts in the jet stream, although climate change is playing a role in making those temperature extremes a little more noticeable. Now, when the flash freeze originally happened, we had a big time drop in temperatures. You may remember before that snowstorm, it was actually pretty balmy outside. The feels like temperature plunged 70 degrees in just a matter of hours. In 12 hours time, that flash freeze took hold and we saw wind chill warnings with sub 20 to negative 30 degree feels like temperatures. Now, as we headed towards Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, our high temperature both of those days was only 15. And mind you, that's our high. The low temperatures were awfully close to the 0 degree mark. So after that flash freeze, we saw an extreme drop in those temperatures and an even bigger drop in the feels like. Now, our 10-day forecast on WTOL 11 features a big warm up and a big change in the weather. It's hard to believe we were below zero a week ago. That was last Friday. Remember when we were at -3. This Friday, as you're reading this or watching this on YouTube or WTOL 11 Plus, 51 degrees. We were at 3 below a week ago, and of course the wind chill factor was even colder. The holiday weekend's also going to be above average, and looking ahead to next week, remember that 91-degree temperature swing we talked about? Tuesday's going to be 61 degrees, going from a winter chill to more of a spring-like feel. Even into next week, we're still going to remain in the 40s, which is well above average by January standards. Now, it's important to remember that weather and climate are two different things. Even though we had the Arctic blast, we're having the spring warmth now. What does the overall data tell us? December is the month of all the months out of the year. December is the one that is warming up the most. On average, in the last decade, we've seen a 3-degree increase in December temperatures. And of all those months, 3 degrees is the most we have warmed up. And that's just in the last 10 years. Think about how much we've warmed up since 1970, 1950, let alone the Industrial Revolution era. Now, as a whole, extreme cold is becoming less frequent. This is a look at Toledo in particular, although it is similar across all of Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. On the start of the graph, we've got 1970. We often saw extremely cold temperatures back then, and our normal lowest low of the winter was well below zero. We've actually risen 10.7 degrees in terms of the coldest days of the winter months. In other words, the extreme cold is getting less frequent, and we're seeing more mild, balmy days during the winter months. That is not to say that cold is out of the question. In fact, we did see that this year, but it goes to show that cold is becoming less frequent. That's the overall bigger picture trend. Now, winter warming is most pronounced in December, and it's not just Toledo. Look at this. The entire lower 48 United States has seen some degree of winter warming. The most noticeable is those darker reds, where you see at least a 3-degree increase in winter temperatures, and that's primarily across the eastern contiguous United States, mainly east of the Mississippi. West of the Mississippi River, we've still seen about 1 to 2 degree increases, and across the entire Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, New England, even down to Florida, a 3-degree plus increase in winter temperatures, in part due to climate change. This is a trend that is not just true of Toledo, not just true of Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan, but a good chunk of the United States. In fact, 97% of major U.S. cities have seen an uptick or an increase in average winter temperatures since 1970. So what are we expecting going forward? If you stay tuned to the WTOL 11 weather team, you're going to see some milder feeling temperatures, and this fits within the framework of climate change that we've seen. Looking ahead towards the start of January, temperatures well above average, not just for Toledo, but a good portion of the United States. Those darker red colors show you higher confidence in warm temperatures. What does this mean for you? We're going to see lots of days in the 40s and even some days in the 50s looking ahead into early January. Of course, we always remind you that weather and climate are two different things. Some of the extremes that we've seen as of late are more to do with shifts in the jet stream, the fluctuations that guide our day-to-day weather. But of course, climate change is making, on average, winter warming, and also those extremes are a little bit more polarized, and we're seeing rapid fluctuations and changes in the weather. Subscribe on WTOL.com/email and stay tuned for next week's edition of our Climate Friday newsletter.